I'm JG Michael, and this is Parallax Views. This edition of Parallax Views is brought to you by the $10 and above tier supporters of Parallax Views on Patreon. So, with that in mind, producers credit shoutouts to Galen, Matt, Gunnar, Mark, Simon, Alexander, Catherine, G, Tilo, Emilia, Jeremy, Jeff, John, Bert, Brian, Elliot, Michael, Brace, James, Nick, Mersham, Galen, Gareth, Arlen, Bo, Christopher, Michael, Gigadelic Media, Will, Chance, Chase, Dan, Big Bob, David H, Y. Kellerman, Sadeed 13, Kathleen, David, Ava, Bob, The West Bank Robbery Podcast, Jamie, Enoch, Gary, Max, Ishtofer, James, Martin, Matthew Ho, Brian, Nobody, Thomas, and Dano. And now on to the show. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this short but sweet edition of the program, I provide a part 2 of sorts to my conversation with Matthew Petti. You don't have to listen to part 1 to follow what's going on in part 2. We're dealing with a distinct topic. I'll get to that, but first I want to remind you that you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. I am currently without any advertisers or sponsors, so your support on Patreon is needed now more than ever. With that out of the way, this is the second part of my conversation with Reason Magazine's Matthew Petti, and this time we're delving into the Great New Jersey drone invasion. There's been sightings of these mystery drones starting in New Jersey, and now it's spreading, I believe, to Pennsylvania and other states, and it is getting wild, folks. It's turning into, well, what Matthew and I would argue is becoming a mass panic of sorts. I mean, Matthew covered this recently in a Reason Magazine article entitled, "No, an Iranian mothership isn't attacking New Jersey with UFOs. The wave of drone sightings is sparking sci-fi speculation mixed with war fever." Now, if you're wondering, what's this talk of an Iranian mothership? Well, Representative Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey, Republican representative, has declared that these drones are the result of an Iranian mothership being launched a month ago. I think, sans any evidence, making claims like this, especially as a member of Congress, is just, I have no words for it, but in any case, we're going to have a conversation about that article and just about drones in general. So this is going to be a fascinating conversation, a little bit more lighthearted than our Syria coverage and our Middle East coverage. I hope you enjoy it. So with that being said, let's get right to it with Reason Magazine's Matthew Petti on the Great New Jersey drone invasion. Before we start closing out, I know you do a lot of coverage of how the media handles various stories when it comes to the Middle East. Are there any stories that have stuck out to you recently that you've written about, either at your Substack or Reason, that you think are worth covering?
You want to talk about the drone thing?
Yes.
All
You knew
right.
that's where I was going.
Yes, I did. I figured. It's because
So for people that don't know or are living under a rock, there's just drones being sighted all over the place in like New Jersey, especially, and in Pennsylvania. I've even heard about sightings in Ohio. It's like the drone version of a UFO flap, and I don't know what to make of it.
yeah, I mean, it's funny because after that, some member of Congress came out and said, and I think he retracted it. It was obvious bullshit, but he said that there is an Iranian mothership off the coast of the United States flying drones into New Jersey, and as
He
soon
called
as
it a
that
what?
Iranian mothership.
Oh my!
And a bunch of people messaged me like when that was like, Matthew, you are from New Jersey, you are a drone hobbyist, and you cover the Middle East. You have to cover this story. Um, I mean, the Iranian mothership is real. It's not off the coast of New Jersey. There is actually there. I think what this member of Congress was kind of half remembering was that Iran recently did start like a sort of aircraft carrier for drones. Like the Iranian Navy now has something like this. Um, it's still in the port in Iran. I think Iran has a lot bigger things to worry about than, harassing New Jersey, harassing Tony Soprano with their aircraft carrier. But no, I mean, I think the UFO thing, you're kind of hitting the nail on the head. I think it is, people have always seen lights in the sky. Maybe one day they thought it was angels, another time they thought it was aliens. Now they think it's national security threats because that's what's on everyone's mind. I think there were some sightings of drones in places they shouldn't have been, like military bases or tailing a Coast Guard ship. That, I mean, who knows? I don't know. Like a lot of people in the world own drones. I own a drone. I can show you my drone right now. Uh,
Oh, that's wild.
I'm licensed by the FAA to have this, but it costs you $5 to get a hobby license. But that's what I'm saying. Like it costs $5 to get a hobby license. A lot of people fly drones. Maybe there was something nefarious going on. Maybe someone was just really stupid and doing things they shouldn't have. But as soon as the news story went out about drones, suddenly everyone started seeing them. And the thing is that a lot of these cases were just provably not drones. I've seen all these photos published by like local media that like that's an airplane. That's a fucking airplane. That's a helicopter, right? It lights in the sky. Like, yeah, you live near an airport. And I think there have been some, I think like Congressman Andy Kim actually kind of went and personally investigated one of these sightings, like showed up at a place where people were seeing drones every night, looked at it, and then looked at his like flight tracker app and is like, that is just a plane. Um, and I think the FBI very recently, I might write about this, but the FBI recently put out a statement telling people to stop like shooting guns or laser pointers into the sky when they think they see a drone because you're just I mean, people are going to end up catching federal charges because the media told them that, scary Muslim drones are in their backyard.
I can't believe the Iranian mothership thing. Oh my God. I mean, I've heard people say, oh, it must be Iranian drones. And I just think to myself, how can we jump to these conclusions? Like,
I
have
mean,
we learned nothing from.
it's crazy they're jumping to Iran because why not China? Like China has actually sent flying spy objects over the US. Iran is like, but it's like, right? Because I think there is something really interesting there going on where I think in 2020, everything was China, China, China. And then I think the American elite kind of stared that in the face and realized,
Did you see
oh,
what Harris said before the election about how,
yeah,
she was
Iran is the
asked what
number
the
one
biggest
enemy.
threat to America was. I thought she was going to say China or Russia. She said Iran. And
No, and
I was like, what?
I think the Middle East has become this like sort of psychological thing that the American elite has just staked all of their because look, what's happening in Ukraine is just like this grinding war of attrition. There's not going to be any satisfying ending to that. Um, China, the US is like not in a really great position to deal with Chinese hegemony. What's the one place where they can score victories is the Middle East. And so the American elite has invested so much emotional and also just material resources into the Middle East in hopes that we can just like, show someone who's boss. It's like that old Thomas Friedman quote from 2003, like you got to pick up a small country and throw them against the wall and say, suck on this. Um, right? And I think that the Iranian drone thing is just sort of one of the weird sort of like subconscious bubblings of that in where we don't even assume it's China, even though China is still a threat and China actually has like provably not in like crazy people paranoid way, but actually provably fly spy objects over the US. We don't even want to think about that or look at that.
It's just really unfortunate that people are
And
jumping to.
I'm not saying that the drones over the military base in New Jersey were Chinese either. I have no idea what they are. Like it could have just
Well, I was
been
gonna say real quick, at this point you could say it was since it's happening in New Jersey, you could say it was Mother Leeds and the New Jersey Devil Child, like
Yeah.
I mean, you might as well at this point. I mean, it has about as much basis in reality to claim that it's this or that. We simply don't know what these drones are.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that they're even real, maybe the drone sighting was just maybe it was all made up. Maybe there were no drones to begin with. Um, I would not
And
put it
people
past.
say that's crazy, but I do feel like I've studied mass hysteria and mass panics, and this feels like it could be one of those.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's provably like it is provably at least a large chunk of these are provably not real in mass hysteria. We just don't know whether the real like inciting incident existed. And look, I don't put it past people do really dumb shit with drones. I've written also just kind of as a even though I covered like international politics and serious like sort of palate cleanser is to write about the drone community because drone hobbyists have done some very stupid things. And I think this it would be a very sad thing if this drone hysteria just killed the like private drone ownership and they passed a bunch of really annoying laws. Because drones are actually like a wonderful consumer product. I don't know. I'm like gonna become a sales rep for like the local Best Buy, aren't I? But no, I mean no, I mean I think it would suck if they passed a bunch of laws that just made life harder for drone owners because of something that didn't happen. But I also think it's very possible, like the initial thing that caused people to be alarmed was just some YouTuber or something, or just some hobbyist being really stupid.
This could become like a real problem too, because eventually there's going to be someone that just like shoots down a drone or attacks. Like I just this could
Yeah,
become
fun
very
fact.
nasty.
Okay. Fun fact is the FAA regulates drones like manned aircraft, which means shooting at a drone legally is like shooting at an airplane. Like people do not realize that if you attack like the airspace above your house is public land. It's treated under like above the tree line under aviation law, that's navigable airspace. As a drone pilot, you're supposed to observe all the rules of the road. Um, like the same ones that aircraft pilots do, along with drone specific ones. But also, as people on the ground, you're not supposed to interfere with that in any way. And if you shoot someone's drone down, you could cop federal charges. Like, I want people to understand, like, it is like not a joke.
I was going to say, are there any exceptions to that? Like, if it comes too close to a house, can you do anything about it? Or
I think if it dips below I think if it dips, like if there's like a something above it on the, like if it's under a roof, like if you can't go into someone's house, um, but yeah, no, I mean, the other thing, a lot of cities and states will regulate drone flights by basically regulating where you can take off and land. The other thing is that drones, by law, have to be within line of sight. It's very vague. It's very like you can't just go and fly your drone to someone's house 5 houses over and just dip into their backyard. You have to be there. And I think a lot of like cities and towns, uh, use this to basically regulate. Like they can't regulate the flight of the drone, but they can regulate you as the pilot do on the ground. Like in the National Park Service, they cannot the FAA, but they you're not allowed to operate a drone from national park territory. But if you were if you were standing right outside the national park, took off, flew over within line of sight, then that's allowed. But yeah, either way, like you're not like shooting a drone is like shooting an aircraft. Like you are interfering with air traffic, and that's just with a weapon, and that's just like not. I can actually tell you a funny story of how I think one of the first test cases where they regulated drones like aircraft was 2014. There's some kid in Connecticut, Austin Hogwoot, who God, you got me talking about drones now. Uh, he had taped a gun to like a homemade drone and posted a 10-second YouTube video of just like like shooting the gun from the drone into the woods. And this was 2014 YouTube, so a 10-second video of someone doing something stupid like that could go super viral, and it did. And it like ended up on CNN, and there was all this like crazy outcry, and the FAA was kind of like or like the feds in general were just like, we don't really know what to do about this. Like, we don't, this should be illegal, but we don't know if it is. And then I think the FAA concluded, like, okay, a drone is an aircraft, and there's already a law against firing a weapon out of an aircraft. Therefore, this is an aviation violation.
I was going to say there was an interesting story. You pointed out that there's been similar panics not involving drones going back to the 50s. Like you brought up this incident
Yes.
involving car windshields and being shot with BB guns.
Yes, sorry, I've gone on this crazy tangent. In Seattle in the 50s, yeah, there was this thing called the windshield pitting epidemic where there was a case of like a few car windshields got shot out, but some shithead kids vandalized some people's cars with BB guns, and then the report that this had happened went out, and then suddenly everyone started reporting that their cars had been vandalized, and then suddenly people started noticing dents and holes and dings in their cars at a rate way too high to have been the work of like any human hands. Like even if like half the city was shooting the other half the city's cars with BB gun, right? And then it turned into all these crazy fantastical things about this is caused by like nuclear testing or some military radio array or all sorts of crazy things that were like there was some kind of insect that has evolved to burrow into car windshields. And then in the end, like I think the Seattle Crime Lab did like a random sampling of cars or something. It included like, all right, some of these windows had actually been shot out by BB guns. 95% of them were just regular dents that people hadn't noticed before, but now that they were on the lookout for vandals, suddenly they saw this.
I also didn't realize until I read your article that there's sort of been a history in Iran of this sort of not drone mania, but its precursor,
UFOs,
UFO
yeah.
mania.
No, I mean there was yeah, no, Iranians are like Americans in a lot of ways. And one of them is UFO sightings. In the 70s, back when Iran, when we talk about the monarchy, back when Iran was a US ally, um, there had been sightings of like one fighter, actually one sighting singular. There had been a fighter pilot who had like seen some weird, or multiple people had seen this. They sent a fighter jet up to look at it, and then as soon as the pilot got close, it like jammed all his instruments, and it was this orb like making weird colors, and then he tried to shoot at it, and it just disappeared. That was never fully explained. I've been meaning to do some reading on it because I'm sure there is an explanation. But then in the years since, there have been all these like reports of UFOs, including by Iranian fighter pilots, after the Islamic Republic. One theory is that this is just, some kind of advanced spy technology, and Iran is kind of embarrassed that they can't shoot it down, so they're exaggerating its capabilities. Because they actually have America has sent drones over Iran, and Iran has brought them down sometimes. Um, but uh, could be that the Stargate is under Tehran, and they actually are visiting, and Khamenei, the reason he's so stubborn about hijab and seems to be so incompetent at a lot of other things is because the aliens are telling him.
So before we close out, I mean, we're joking about all of this, but do you think there is like something important we can get out of this crazy drone mania that we're seeing right now and what it tells us about our society and the war fever that we get into when we're yelling about Iranian motherships?
Yeah, I think war fever is like I think that the American society, I think the hawks are ascendant, right? I think they under sort of Obama and early Trump, there was a sort of dovish feeling in America. There was a feeling that the United States had overstretched its commitments and maybe we should start pulling them back. I think the elite has reacted very hard against all of that, is very much in favor of escalation on all fronts, and I think part of the reason the drone media caught on is it's become um sort of encouraged and sort of what's the word validated by these people in authority who have been chasing after every single crazy national security panic, whether it's like Hezbollah at the Mexican border or Day of Jihad or whatever else. I mean, this is just the latest in a series of things
You
that
know
like
what's weird about that? Not to interrupt you, but I've always said about the a few years ago, all I heard was UFOs, UFOs, UFOs. I even saw people like Sager and Jetty making the, I want to believe jokes, and Congress needs to investigate UFOs, and then it would always come down to like the defense budget, and oh, we need more money to investigate these. And I just like I've long felt that the UFO stuff is really just a way for like the military industrial complex to get more cash flow.
Right, but now they don't even have to mystify it. Now they don't even have to say, "Oh, it's like some paranormal thing that we need to investigate." Now it's just straight up like the enemy is at the doorstep. We
Right,
need
right,
more
right. Now you
investigators.
could say, well, the UFOs are actually just, UAPs from Iran.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. I think this is sort of what I'm getting at. Is like it's there's a long history of like national security hysteria, and I think UFOs. Um, I think some of it was always a smokescreen for like hiding U.S. government technology or not admitting, or like sort of we know it's an enemy thing, but we don't want to show our hand
we're
on.
going down deep conspiracy lore now.
No, but I think that some of this stuff has actually been like provably documented that some sort like Area 51 was a test site for experimental aircraft, right? Like some of this stuff is people seeing US government aircraft and not knowing or seeing or there's like enemy spy craft and the government's going to keep its cards close to its chest, doesn't want to admit what's real and what's not. Um and I think, yeah, the UAP fever and or whatever they called it a couple of years ago was, I think, them sort of more explicitly harnessing this of like, oh yeah, weird, mysterious things. Maybe you should give us money.
Right? Well, that does it for this edition of Parallax Views. As always, if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. And with that being said, until next time, you've been listening to Parallax Views with Parallax Views to Parallax Views with Parallax Views.
The way out is not simply to say, don't do it, just to prohibit. It's nothing else. If we don't do it, others will be doing it like crazy. So, we have to confront the problem. But no, basically, I know of the great anxieties, problems, new forms of control, but it's also new forms of freedom. This is why I always emphasize that internet and all this new digital stuff, it's a very ambiguous phenomenon, but it's the field of struggle. New forms of enslavement, but at the same time, new incredible forms of freedom. We have to accept the fight with no nostalgia for old, allegedly more authentic communities or whatever. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.